Welcome to Damn Kind Conversations. Today we're going to be talking to Schambra Stevens. Neil is a coach for people who work in the creative industry, so strategists and creatives, among others. Neil is looking to support people who are at a point in their career where they're not only looking for more purpose and meaning in the work that they do, but are also looking to support others in that process also. The conversation is an open, wonderful dialogue between two people who are bearing their souls. I'm very grateful for this conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. Rather than ask you to introduce yourself, which can often generate an automated response, I will give you space to introduce yourself, but I'd also like to start with a couple of prompts. Let's start with...
Oh, can I ask?
Yeah.
Is it okay to drink?
It's absolutely okay to drink. You can service your basic needs as we go through this conversation. So it's very early. It is 8:30 in the morning. We scheduled this to start at 8 in the morning. Normally I don't get out of bed until 8 in the morning.
Okay.
So this is a serious achievement. I appreciate the coffee.
Well done, Ben.
Could you, it's not about me, but could you maybe start by talking a little bit about your morning ritual and why it's important to you personally?
Sure. First thing I'd say is I think that ritual is pretty much a loaded word. And there's lots of things that I see that having a ritual, and what's your ritual? What do you do every day? Puts pressure on people, I think. Oh, I don't have that routine. For me, I set my alarm at 5 a.m. and sometimes I snooze. I don't get up straight away. I try to. Sometimes I listen to myself, listen to my body, whatever. And then what I do, my routine is to get up and then I soak some oatmeal, some oats, and I get ready and then I cycle to the boss, Amsterdam's the boss, and I go for a swim. And I try and do that most mornings. The exceptions are when it's really raining, because cycling half an hour in the rain, swimming in cold water and then putting wet clothes on, probably not a good idea. But the journey to the boss, the cycle there, and particularly the moments in the water are just really special, because I find that when I wake up in the morning, I've got a bazillion ideas, and having that time just to do mental checklists, but then having just ideas flow in and out is a really important part of my day and my process. When you're in the water, and particularly as we get into the winter months when it's really cold, you have to focus on breathing and just, the whole mindset thing of pushing the cold away and all the rest of it, and then just embracing how that makes you feel. And that's when some of the good stuff starts flowing in. So that's why I do it, and I look forward to that. And as I always say, there's 101 reasons not to do it, but you never regret a swim.
Yeah, what people can't see currently is that just off the side of a camera, because we do film this interview as well, but most people will probably be listening to this, there's some drying swimming shorts on a radiator. Add a little towel. It's just a beautiful little scene here of discipline and wholesome living.
Yeah, I've been this morning, and the water temperature was 15 degrees and the air temperature was 6. And I'm there with my fellow, we say hello, so we don't know each other, but we embrace the moment, and the conversation usually focuses around the temperature of the water. How cold is it? Oh, it's pretty cold. Look at this. Oh, it's a beautiful sky. And that's enough just to, you connect. You know why everybody's there. You're not there for a chit chat and a coffee. It's like you come in, you do the business and you get out. And it's the opposite of that. It's very calm and peaceful. There's not a lot of drying space on a boat, so I have to be quite practical.
No, it's wonderful.
I do it in small batches.
It's a wonderful scene. So I have a couple more prompts, and the idea behind this is just to pull out a few nuggets that help establish a foundation and essence to who you are. The next one, I'm not sure whether this will generate the right response, but let's see. I'm curious if you have a stone in your pocket.
A stone in my pocket?
Mm-hmm. I remember one walk we took, you were like, I have this little pebble in my pocket, and you rub your thumb against it.
Oh, okay.
Do you still have that?
I don't have it in my pocket, but it's on my desk.
There it is.
There.
There it is. That is pretty close. Could you talk about this pebble?
Yeah. So
could you also maybe describe it for me, please?
Sure. It's a black, a sort of matte, oblong, egg-shaped stone. And I don't know what it's actually made of in terms of, or it's volcanic or it's whatever. And I picked it up on a beach. I think it was in Croatia. Either Croatia. I've spent a lot of time on beaches and walking on beaches. And I see interesting stones and things like that. I'm amazed that you remember this bit. And what I really like about it, and I don't know, it is basically there's an indentation in it, which, if we're on video, it just fits my thumb. And when I'm sitting, I just rub it. And whenever there's certain practices that I do where I do visualization exercises with a client, I pick up the stone and it just helps me. I don't know what it really does, but it's just comforting. The shape in the hand, the motion of just rubbing it, I just find it very calming and grounding. And it's something natural. And I think I like having natural things around as a reminder of that we're guests on the planet. We think that we own it, and we've done a really bad job of taking care of it. Not to get all worthy, but just having natural things around us. And again, that's one of the reasons why I swim in the morning as well, because you're in the middle of this lake. I just find it very grounding and comforting and reassuring. Don't always have it in my pocket. I think also being a parent, kids give you stuff. Hey, Dad, I've got this. Can I? And you pick it up and you put it in your pocket and you keep it. And sometimes I've got a selection of little stones over there from my children. Some things you don't keep. Just, sorry guys if you're watching this. At the end of the walk, you put it back on the path. Or a feather. Yeah, have you got that feather, Dad? No, it flew away.
Reminds me of my nephews. Oh, check out this stick. Can you hold on to this stick?
Yeah,
and the mother will be like, don't throw that away. They will ask about it later.
Yeah, absolutely.
3 weeks later, they'll be asking about that stick.
Yeah. So what natural things do you have in your pocket?
Ooh. I wouldn't say that I have natural things in my pocket, so I don't have any. But I do remember this anecdote you shared with me about the stone. I think what I do take from what you're sharing, that I am doing more of late, is gathering artifacts that symbolize certain things to me. For a while, I stopped doing that. And I think just a few months ago, I was having dinner with a very good friend. And in Amsterdam, you have these people that go through a restaurant with a Polaroid camera and they ask if you want to take their photo. And I think maybe for years, I've just got into this routine of saying, no, don't have cash, blah, blah, blah. But my friend's like, oh yeah, let's do it. Yeah, great. So I have this wonderful little Polaroid photo of me and my friend. It's probably the first artifact of late that I've put up in my newly renovated apartment. It's quite sparse at the moment. Yeah. So it's a moment when I'm starting to ground myself in my own space again.
Nice.
And how that is now starting to evolve is I've started to gather items that friends are producing. So a couple of weeks ago, I went to see a friend release a new EP. And it was a wonderful, lovely experience. It's so nice to see your friends taking their passion seriously and to be just making something, putting it out there to share. And got him to sign a little poster of his EP. And that now sits proudly in my apartment. So there's a few things, and I think they ground me to my friends, to my values, and to, to the simple things. Okay, I have another question, a little prompt for you, if I may. How's your cup this morning?
Oh, there you go. So should I probably explain about the cup first, or should I just dive straight in?
I wonder whether you can talk about your cup and explain the concept as you go.
So my cup this morning is, I would say, more than half full. It's pretty darn good today. And basically the idea of your cup is that quite often in life people go, hey, how are you? Great. How are you? Good. And that's it. It's nothing. And it's nice and it's an acknowledgement. But if you were to turn around and say, hey Ben, how are you doing today? You go, I'm having a shocker. It's a really awful, and you're just passing them in the street. You're like, oh, that's a bit too much, or in the office or whatever. So what I encourage people to do is to, rather than describe how they are, to kick things off by saying, how big's your cup? How full's your cup? So every day you get a cup. You think about how big the cup is. I drink a lot of coffee, so I sometimes have an espresso, sometimes I have bigger. And then you get a certain amount of water every day that you use to fill the cup. And this is all about you, so you know how much water you have to put in that. So you're feeling like, I'm feeling really full, I'm feeling really good, or like I'm feeling low energy or whatever. So you would describe that to the person. And say, my cup it's about average, and it's about half full. And then you know how someone's doing. If their cup is full, they've got a lot of energy. But if it's small and not a lot of water in their cup, you think, okay, that's an indication how I might lean into the conversation in a different way. So it's a way of navigating some of the shortcomings that we have in society generally, of communication, and connecting with someone a little deeper, I think, and a better understanding. And you might be something like, my cup is small, and you go, okay, all right, I got you. And then you know, without them having to really open up and explain. Maybe they don't have the time to explain how they're really feeling or why they're feeling that way. But it's reciprocal, because then I've said to you, I'm in a good place, or I'm in a less than good place. And then we both know where we are. And obviously the ritual is then saying, I would say to you, Ben, how's your cup? So how's your cup today, Ben?
Mm-hmm.
No, how's your cup today, Ben?
Yeah, I'm going to think about it. My cup is good. Is good.
Mm.
It is a fair-sized cup. A lot like the one that's sitting in front of me with the coffee that you made for me. Not a huge, double-handed, wide-opening mug, but a neat, put-together mug that I can hold in one hand. It's not overbearing. It is well-weighted and shows signs of having content that has been made with love. I really like that, let's call it a tool that you described, because I didn't think about it in terms of sharing it with somebody else. I thought about it in terms of a way to assess how you really are. Because speaking from experience, I can wake up in the morning and almost default say, oh, I'm tired, I'm not good. It's an unfortunate track in my mind that sometimes plays out. And I can go to the gym, or maybe you go for a swim. There's ways to knock yourself out of it.
Yeah.
But there's also, in this instance, this tool where you can pause, visualize something, and then it's like a reality check.
Yeah. That's a really good point you make, because I use it as a conversational tool. But if you were on your own and when you first woke up and you think, hey, or when you get going a little bit, how is my cup today? You use some lovely adjectives. It's not overbearing and well-weighted and all this sort of stuff. And without going into too much depth and detail or whatever, I used the tool in a particular situation last year when sadly my mother was deteriorating, and it was a sort of an end-of-life situation. And I was there with my two older sisters. And rather than saying, how are you? How are you doing? You're like, I'm awful. It's awful. But there were varying degrees of that. So as a tool of saying, how's your cup today? We don't have to keep saying like, how are you feeling? How are you feeling right now? And that really helped us. And it was quite a long period of time that we had to go through that. So rather than repeating that thing, you just reference it and it just helped. And I still get texts from my sisters who are in the UK, and we text regularly, but it's the question, how's your cup? And it's a nice little shorthand, and it's very comforting and reassuring. And it brings you into the conversation in a different way, which I think is a tool when there's so many, you mentioned rituals before, but there's so many rituals that we have in conversation today that, oh mate, smashed it, nailed it, crushed it, all that stuff. You're like, great, thanks for the enthusiasm. But actually, I'm not opposed to social media at all, but going in and going, that's exciting news, well done, good for you, or whatever, that might be a different way of saying crushed it, or nailed it, or whatever your announcement is. I'm very keen on, and we'll probably get into it, words and the use of words and the impact that words have. And yeah, if ever I use the expression smashed it on LinkedIn, then please feel free to call me out.
I would like to pivot to something around words. I have a book in front of me, and if you would indulge me, I would like to read something from this book.
Oh, nice.
Would that be okay?
Do you know, nobody's ever done that, so I'd love that.
Okay.
And you're very good at it.
I'm going to read something from a book. It's titled Suitable Gifts.
Oh.
When I'm old, please do not bring me sweets. Soft ones, my dears, in deference to my teeth. Or pale pink soap, or flasks of tepid scent. Not even slippers, gentle to slow feet. Bring me berries from some rampant hedge, or beech leaves, shrieking the return of spring. Lupins aflame with rain, or damp, dark moss, cloistered in woods and smelling of pines. Keep your slim rosebuds, lovely as they are, but bring me clover, cowslips, campion, and failing all, a handful of wet earth, that I may breathe its wholeness and be free.
Yeah.
This is from a book that you wrote, but it's actually a sample of your mother's writing.
It is.
You were mentioning before that your words are important to you.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about your mother and your impetus to write a book that's clear now to people listening? Neil has written a book and just recently released it, which we'll talk about maybe a bit more. But I loved this. I love the book as well, but I loved this particular excerpt because it really grounded me in the present moment, and the words were very clear and descriptive, and it just made me smile.
Yeah. You caught me off guard a little bit with that. So yes, that is one of my mother's poems. She wrote, her name was Jean Marion Stevens, that was her published author's name. And as well as being my mum, and a mum to my two older sisters as well, she was a poet and a writer. And poetry and words were her first, one of her first loves. She wrote about nature, and she wrote about faith, and she wrote about family. Those were real values that were super important to her. And she grew up in Hertfordshire, in a little place called Boxmoor, which is where I grew up. And she lived, there was nature in close proximity, and she used to wander on the common and the moors and things around that, and it was a real inspiration for her. And at 16 she wrote a short story and she submitted it, and she won this competition, and the prize for winning was that you got membership of the Society of Women's Writers and Journalists, which is an international organisation. It's quite a significant one. And so that started her membership of the SWWJ, as it was known in our house. She then went on to be a member for close to 75 years. And was the longest serving member of the Society of Women. And she ended up being the vice president of it. And poetry and writing and words, as a child, it was like mumbles, what was the right word? And you used to get quite cross at the radio when people weren't using words in the right way. She was also an English teacher and things, so grammar was really important. And she was a great letter writer and typewriter and all the rest of it. And she passed away on March the 22nd last year, 2022. And the date is significant because it is World Poetry Day. So she died on World Poetry Day, which at the time, I remember my sisters and I gave us some real sort of cheery, teary comfort and we were like, oh my God, of course she died on World Poetry Day. And the March 22nd is World Poetry Day every year. So it's not like it's the third Tuesday of March or whatever, it's every year. So it's a constant reminder. And that was, at the time, I went through three bereavements, family bereavements in 6 months. And the impact that had on me was to really, as you can probably imagine, think about life and what you're doing and the values. And so I tinkered around the edges of putting words together, whatever. And that was the impetus. I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. And so the book is dedicated to my mum, and it's dedicated to my 2 children as well, who are 13 and 15. And why it's dedicated to those 3 important people in my life is like, I'm in the middle. So I've got my mum's legacy, and by no means am I comparing myself to her words and those beautiful words that you read, but to my children as well. So that 13, 15, when they come into the workplace and in the next, 5, 10 years, whatever it is, that they have certain values and their approach to work and what's important to them is well established and well grounded. Can I change work culture? Yeah, I mean, I can do my bit, but that's my intention, that's my mission to really try and change that. And that's why the book is dedicated to them and to my mum. And why that's particularly poignant is that I read that at my mum's Thanksgiving service.
Did you?
Yeah. So the last line about wet earth and set me free is particularly poignant for me.
Mm. It really grounded me.
That's what triggered me. I've read it so many times, but in that moment, it was the words. We all read some of my mum's poetry, my sisters and I, and it's just the right thing to do.
I don't want to overstep my bounds, but I will ask the question. I'm sure you've said everything you wanted to say to your mother, but if you could say anything to her now, what would you say?
That's a really good question. She probably knows, but I would probably say, Mum, I've just published a book. And she'd probably say something calm, well done. She was a very calm, gentle soul, but yeah, that'd probably be it.
So on that, I feel like I wanted to just start this conversation by, rather than saying, hey, Neil, introduce yourself, tell us about your book, a couple of things, because we know each other. We have what we call the Baked Goods research program going on.
Are we going to share that with the world? Oh my gosh, Ben.
Well,
I thought that was our secret.
For anyone listening, Neil and I regularly meet up I think this is my sneaky way of getting a little bit of free coaching, but actually what we're really doing is purveying the different cinnamon bun options that exist within the city. I'm just wanted to pull out some things from our time, because we've had some really lovely conversations over the time, and I'm really hoping that this conversation will stay true to the conversations we have in private, done tastefully, of course. But I'd love it if you could introduce yourself now, please.
Sure. So my full name is Neil Schambra Stevens, and I'm originally from the UK, but I haven't actually lived there for over 20 years. And I've lived in Amsterdam, I've lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, I've lived in Italy, worked in Switzerland. And why I share those experiences is that I've moved around for life and for work. And my first part of my working journey was very much in working for brands and in marketing. I worked for particularly sportswear brands. I worked for Nike Inc., for Converse, for Vans, Asics, Polaroid, Lenovo. And yeah, that's given me an opportunity to get grounded in kind of corporate culture and brand culture. I've worked on the agency side, I've worked on the brand side, I've worked on the client side. And that gave me an opportunity to, a few years ago, I realized that I'm really interested in people. The teams that I've worked with teams in various sizes, but it's actually the people that really fascinate me in terms of enabling people to, it's a dreadful expression, reach their full potential, find their voice, all those wonderful kind of cliches and things. But now, so I'm a former CMO turned coach, and I coach a very specific group of people, which is within the middle of organization or agencies and brands. I'm interested in those people who are becoming a leader for the first time and who go from being like a generalist or a specialist to being a generalist. And they go from designing and creating things to managing people and meetings. And also that's a completely different skill set. So I work with creatives, strategists and marketing folks. And I'm based here in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, but I work online pretty much. It's one of the few sort of in-person conversations that I have. And so yeah, my clients are here, they're in the UK, they're in the US. And yeah, my company coaching consultancy is Mercury Jam Coaching. And yeah, I've been doing this for a few years. And it's the sort of the four values that I have for the agency are kindness, gratitude, resilience, and momentum. And they come from very sort of personal experiences that I've had in the last few years and the lessons that I learned from those experiences that I put back into my coaching programs and in try and encourage people to rethink and reframe their sort of relationship with work and their working journey. That work is important, but it ain't the be all and end all of everything. Sure, you've got to put bread and cheese on the table, as I always say, but how you do that and the value and the attention that you give to work, I think there's an opportunity to relook at that and rephrase that, particularly with everything that's happened in the world in the post-pandemic or during the pandemic.
So I just have your bio here, and there's a couple of words I also want to pull out that I thought were important. You talked about these middle-level group of people, creative strategists, rising talent, but I also have heard you say before, when you talk about kindness, it's about helping people be seen, heard, and valued. Could you talk about those choices of words that you do and what that's about?
Kindness is a value that I grew up with. It's something that my parents demonstrated and talked about. And so it's just an instinctive thing. And there are lots of sort of perceptions around kindness. And I think some people think it's quite soft, quite fluffy, and particularly when it comes to business. And I thought about the impact that kindness has on somebody. When you have a kind act, when you are intentional towards somebody, it's not about you, it's not about the giver, it's about the receiver per se. And how that a small action, words, whatever it is, can change the course of somebody's day. And without being too grandiose, it can change their life. It really can. The choices, the confidence it gives them, the self-belief, whatever it might be. And I looked at those words and in what are the three things that kindness does? And it enables you to be seen. I see you, Ben. And then I hear what you say. I hear in your words. And then it creates that interaction, creates a value to it. And I invite anybody listening or watching this to, when you're next engaging with someone, like, I don't know, sitting down for a coffee or ordering somebody a drink or whatever it is, and say to them, instead of saying, how are you? And they go, great. And this isn't like another cup thing. Say, how are you doing today? Or how's your day started? and watch what happens.
Mm.
And you listen to and listening is a really kind of key thing as well. You listening to their response and see what happens. A couple of prompts. Ben, you're the master at prompts. And you just see the difference that makes. And it's a genuine thing. Like you read the situation and somebody's, maybe it's they don't have time for this interaction or whatever. But what's that? And people will stop and pause and they're like, you've actually asked me a question. I'm like, yeah, because I really want to know.
Can I share a personal example? I was thinking about this idea of actionable kindness recently. And as I was cycling here this morning, I was trying to think of recent events where I've witnessed this to make it more tangible. And 3 days ago, I was sitting in the sauna with two other people, a man and a woman. And the man was just making all kinds of sighing noises. I thought he was unwell. So he's like really suffering. Oh. And I didn't want to ask him on the spot, you okay? But he ended up leaving. But it stuck with me. I was thinking, what is going on with this guy? But his friend was still there. And managed to muster up the courage because you're in towels, you're naked. Also,
fairly
talking to a woman, don't want her to misunderstand what's going on here. I just said to her, is your friend okay? She went, oh, he's fine. He just has a different aptitude for these things. and two things were amazing about this. First of all, her choice of words, aptitude. It was so gentle and forgiving and loving. But what followed was just a sort of like a breaking of the silence. And she just started talking. And we had a conversation.
Okay.
And for me, that felt like a really good example, very light version of actionable kindness, where you act on thoughts of concern and compassion and curiosity.
Yeah.
And how that can lower the barriers and the walls that we put up and lead to a wonderful conversation and discoveries.
I think it's something that curiosity is a good word. I like that. And aptitude, I think, is brilliant. Where and it's not just giving people time and attention just for the sake of it. Because if you ask the question and then you don't listen to their response and you just, oh, that's great, it devalues the experience. But to give you a tangible example, when I was working in Switzerland, I used to commute in from Italy, which sounds far more glamorous than it actually is. I was on the Swiss-Italian border, Italian-Swiss border, and I had to get in early to beat the traffic because I'm crossing the border and all the rest of it. And in your mind, you might have like the opening sequence of the Italian job, and I'm driving a red Ferrari. I'm stuck behind an oil tanker an hour in the morning. But I used to get in early, and I was always usually the first one in the office. And I knew, as my team were coming in, I paid attention to the first one in was Nelson, and he got the training, and then there was Daniel who came on his car, and gradually one by one I would stop and I would get up and say, hey, are you a little bit later? Not to check in on them, the trains are running or they're a bit late or whatever it was. And I'm like, have you had a coffee yet? And I knew little bits of their little nuggets of their life and their story. Another guy, how's things? I was up all night with my daughter or whatever. And it just grounds people. And after I knew the first between 5 and 10 people arriving in the office, I would actually have some interaction with them. They see me, and I had a team of 42 people. So it would be hard, not always practical, to say hello to 42 people every day because there are interactions and all the rest of it. But I would often I would get up from my office and go and just sit with people during the day if there was a spare desk or whatever, because it was a big sort of open plan office, and be like, how are you doing? What's going on today then? How's your day started? And just to give that present, because I was in an office and there was a wall and there was a glass door, but you couldn't see me in there. And so I used to just go and sit and just talk and chat, or I'd come out and go, right, 12 o'clock, who's going for lunch? And I'd go and I'd spend time with people. And I think feeling that presence, making people feel seen, heard, and valued. It's a really, I would say, kindness costs nothing, but it means everything.
I was at your book launch a couple of days ago, and there was a moment when everyone was asking questions, and there was a woman in the audience who asked a lovely question, which I want to steal. She has to be a strategist for sure. I think her name was Marline. She was the one. I'll ask the question. She said, "What is the enemy of kindness?"
Carline. To give her credit.
Yeah. Sorry, Caroline. I only met you in a moment if you're listening to this. I would love to hear your answer to that again.
It's a great question. And I think that, and I'm going to steal somebody's answer as well. I think, who was it? Somebody said that they thought thoughtfulness or unthoughtfulness, being unthoughtful, was the enemy of kindness, where you're just like belligerent and all the rest of it. To be honest and true to what I said the other day was, I think that if you relate it to the workplace, that the lack of, people need to feel safe and secure when they come to work. By that I mean that people feel that you've got their back, that they're not going to get dinged for asking a question that's not right or whatever. To create that open space, that open forum for dialogue. And I always say, you need innovation without recrimination. Can we try this? Can we do this? So I think very much toxic cultures, to give it a label, are the enemy of kindness. And I think the impact that that has on individuals, on the overall efficiency, productivity of a business, and where the focus and the attention is put, I think that people can find that quite demoralizing. And I would say that's, did she say it was the enemy of kindness or the opposite?
It's the enemy.
The enemy, yeah, I think that. And I think just probably actually the opposite of that, let's use my words, is not being seen, not being heard, and not being valued. And those ingredients, I think, probably add up to a toxic culture.
I really zoomed in on, connected to this idea of trust. And trust in the workplace is trust in the business environment.
Yeah.
At many different levels. Even myself, speaking as a freelancer, building long-standing trust with a client or an agency is super important to me.
Yeah. To build on that, I would say that there's a fundamental which often gets overlooked, is that people work for people. And sure, we can have automation and we can have tech and AI and all the rest of it, but there's still a lot of exchange between individuals, between departments, between teams. Speaking as a marketeer, I would always encourage my team to go and sit with operations and supply chain to understand what their world was like. Because say you're launching a new product and it's going to show up in a store or online or wherever it is, there's a whole bunch of people who are helping getting that product made, getting it shipped, getting all those things. It's like the tip of the iceberg. We think, oh, it's brand, it's cool and shiny. But there's 4/5 of the brand is the iceberg. It's what you don't see. And if you're not working, if you're not connected, if you don't have that interaction and trust, it ain't going to happen. I do think that organizations and brands are like little ecosystems. Everybody has a part to play. And you've got to know what your role is, what your value is within that. And everybody contributes something, from the CEO to the receptionist. I'm not diminishing receptionists at all. There's a beautiful story about, I think it was in the US, where end of the year, and this is pre sort of economic times that we're in now, where the receptionist got this huge bonus. People are like, why is so-and-so, quote, all they do is meet and greet. And I'm like, yeah, that's the first thing people see when they walk in our office, and the value that person has. They're worth 10 times this. So I think, the value of seeing every individual within an organization and understanding that they're contributing, and also that giving that individual a sense of worth as well. Oh, I'm just this, or no, you're not. You're playing a part. You're really contributing.
As I'm listening to what you're saying, in the context of business, I also feel like another enemy of kindness is urgency. In the sense that it is very hard to give out kindness when one is feeling rushed or depleted.
So you've used 3 words: urgency, rushed, and depleted. To focus on urgency, right? That's probably let's stick with that, because, hey Ben, we've got to get this out by the end of the week, for example. That's urgency. If everybody, because I would actually challenge that urgency is the end of kindness when you don't have kindness in place. If, for example, that you're working on a particular assignment, project, whatever it might be, there's always deadlines in business. What is my role? What is the priority? What are we trying to achieve with that? If you know those things up front, you can make those personal choices to go, okay, I've got 3 tasks today, but I need to focus on this one. And you don't have to check in with somebody because you've explained it. It's clear, it's simple, this is where we're all kind of aligns people. It puts you in literally and metaphorically, you're all facing the same way. So that you don't need to check in, and I don't need to go, I've got these 3 things, which should I do first? No, I've done that. And then everybody is aligned to that. And it's one of the things with Mercury Jam, and the name where that comes from. It's about working with, when there is this speed and this urgency in business, that you do it in a kindly fashion where everybody has an understanding of what their contribution is. And they're not going to be dinged if like, oh, I'm going to do this before I do that. And I think it works on a macro level and it works on a micro level. Is it hard to implement? Absolutely. But it has to start somewhere. And it has to be grounded in very much into the organization. It's not a manifesto on a wall. It's not be kind on a mug. It's actually people instinctively know what it is. Yeah. So I would challenge that. I'd push back a little bit. I'd say yes, urgency when there's an absence of kindness and clarity.
And I'd also add individual and collective sense of purpose.
Yeah. Because people do get rushed and they do get completed and depleted. And I think, yeah, having that understanding of where people are in their moment, going back to the cup and the energy levels, and yeah.
So I have a question here, which I wrote a few months ago, and I'll update it after I've asked it in its original form. Is kindness good or a hindrance? When should we engage it? And when do other emotions serve us better? I think what I'm actually wanting to ask you here is, when could kindness ever be a hindrance? If you're not too careful and you're a kind soul, you can get walked all over. And actually, I think I read something recently that said, if you're lying down, you're going to get walked over.
People can only walk all over you when you're lying down.
Thank you. There's something here I'd like to discuss around boundaries and appropriate moments to engage it, or to consider what else should be in the toolbox. Should it not be sufficient?
Okay, how I would respond to that is, I think you're alluding to it, is kindness like this constant, is it an always on kind of thing? Am I right? Or something around that? Yeah.
Could be.
But I think what it feels like, what it sounds like is there's a huge difference between being nice and being kind.
Would you explain the difference, please?
Niceness is, it's a level of courtesy, there's a level of respect, but in certain situations it's quite superficial. I'm just being nice. I was just being nice to them. How many times do you hear that? And I think that's something that, sure, be respectful. We need to be courteous and respectful now more than ever to one another. But being kindness is an action, right? It's something that you do in your words, in deeds. It's something that it's a physical manifestation, it's a verbal manifestation. And so if you choose, it's because I believe that it is a mindset that you have, it's always there, right? And I think in certain situations that, again, context is everything, but in certain situations, the kind thing for people is to be really clear and open and direct and tell people in a calm way that this is how you made me feel. This is how I feel about this situation. And it's putting like, I feel this, I feel happy, I feel frustrated, which is very different from I'm frustrated, I'm happy. Labeling the emotion, I feel this, I feel that, really helps. And again, if kindness is a constant drumbeat, it's applicable in pretty much all situations, I would say. I'll put it out there. That when you're working with someone at the beginning of their journey, and if sadly a situation where you have to let somebody go, if you let them go with kindness and explain and help all the rest. I'll give you a great example. During the pandemic, and when, hospitality fell off, travel and hospitality fell off a cliff, and everyone stopped traveling, all the rest of it. Brian Chesky from Airbnb, CEO of Airbnb, he communicated to the whole organization every week for the first, I think, 6 or 7 weeks of probably more. And it's still online, and there's this brilliant letter from Brian Chesky to the whole organization. And he explains the decisions and the choices that they are going to have to make. And the way that he does that, and is done, I would say, with real kindness. He's impacting thousands of people's lives, okay? But he does it in such a way that it's a shitty situation, unprecedented and all the rest of it. But the foundation of Airbnb is be a host. He was being the host, like he had people in his in his house, the house meaning the organization, and he was treating all those people kindly, even though he was impacting and changing their lives. He was, in the US, he was helping with healthcare. There were programs to help people transition into other jobs and recruitment. They went over and above at the time, compared to some pretty brutal examples of people going, sorry, you're out, and all the rest of it. So I think that's an example where you can use kindness in a difficult situation, tragic situation.
I'm also hearing something else, which is, have you read a book called Nonviolent Communication?
I have not.
By Marshall Rosenberg?
No.
Is the name. It's like a little branch out of what you're saying here, which is just about delivery of the message. And nonviolent communication consists of some sort of, there's a framework, touch upon how you feel, how it made you, your personal experience, and an observation rather than a judgment on the other. It's a great book. Recommend it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really feel that if you are very calm and considered and in control, because there's certain things that only you can control, right? And if you give up your power, if you give up your control to somebody else and let that situation impact you, it takes your energy away. And how you misinterpret situations. And there's something that when I work with my clients, there's a thing about how all situations are neutral, and how there's a stage where you go from, you have your thought, your emotion, and your action. And it triggers, and it's the cognitive process when it kicks in. So you think about something, I'm reacting to a situation, and say it's you feel it's something that it's a less than positive situation. So you think about it, then you put an emotion to it, and then you put an action to it. So it's 3 steps away from the original thing. You have no idea what that person, the intention of, but it's how you make them feel. And the energy and the power that you give up in that moment. It's a 5-second rule. It's the other one too, toast falling on the floor and things like that. It's also a very powerful tool to bring it back to yourself and like, what's in my control, what's out of my control. About being present, about not letting go of your energy, which I think is really important these days.
Yeah, there's a question I have in my little notebook around what's your empowered move? And I like what you're saying here about this side. You're saying, I can see you frowning. I'll expand on my answer in a second.
I have something, yeah.
But it's connected to what you said, giving up your power, or where it can leak out almost.
Yeah.
Through undesirable behaviors and
Yeah.
actions and circumstances. And the question I have is, what is your empowered move? So, of late.
Mm.
Do you understand also the question?
I do, but what I'm thinking of, and again, it's just to share a very personal thing. When you're, something that we all have to be aware of when you're talking about non-verbal communication, okay? Because when I was frowning, I don't know if you responded or made any assumptions about that. Years ago, I was in a meeting and I was sitting there and it was a group meeting, I don't know, 10, 20 people there. And somebody said to me, because I was going to raise your hand to ask a question, they went, "Neil, you have your thinking face on." And I was like, what the hell's my thinking face? You don't know me that well. So just to clarify, when you were frowning, right, people were making the assumption of it, that was my thinking face.
Yeah, I immediately had an action, which was...
Oh, I've triggered. Oh. You tell me what you were thinking.
Yeah. Oh, he disagrees. Oh, I'm breaking the flow of the conversation. Things are going to slow down.
That's why I wanted to say it, because I was like, I have no idea what the top half of my head is doing right now. It's an involuntary reaction, like, because that's how I think. I frown a little bit. I would say, I mean, I would build on, in terms of the move or the tool, is to really encourage people to, people say, oh, don't overreact, don't take it personally. All the wrong things to say. But if you yourself think about, okay, this situation is neutral. It's neutral. It's neutral. How am I responding to it? Just take the words, take it on face value. Don't go, well, Ben was trying to catch me out, or Ben was trying to do this. Like, Ben wasn't trying to do anything. He was just sharing something. How I receive that information, what I do with it, it's on me and it's up here, right? The mind is a powerful thing, and we have the ability and the gift to manage our mood and our emotion. And when we are going back to the speed and the urgency thing and the pressure and all the rest of it, someone saying, oh, can you do this? And your response is, why do they ask me to do that? They know how busy I am. Do they? Do they literally know how busy you are? I would question that. And they might be aware that you're working on this project, but in that moment, they don't know exactly. Because being busy, it's your life. You might have your work thing, but you also might have, you've got to go to a dental appointment. You've got to meet somebody after work. You've got to, I don't know, go and get groceries, a childcare, whatever it is. That's your life. And that person asking that question has no idea what's going on. So always bring it back to you. Bring it back into your control. And just go, okay, I'm neutral. Keep it neutral. And if you do go on that journey, which we do many times a day, the thought, the emotion, the action, before you get to go through the process, but then just pause. Go, okay, bring it back to me.
Thank you for answering the how as well.
Oh, you're such a strategist.
Okay, so I don't want to go down in energy, because I feel like we are enjoying a lovely little walk up the hill here, but I do want to take a moment to see where this goes. Could you talk to me about the 4 major stress triggers in life, your personal experience with them, how you've navigated it, and what your core piece of advice would be to anyone marching through the murk of a similar suffering?
Marching through the murk. Words matter, Ben. I love that. Sure. What are the 4 stress triggers in life? It is losing a job, bereavement, marriage or divorce, and moving house. And I experienced all 4 of those in the space of 6 to 12 months going into the pandemic. And at the time, very much in the sort of the eye of the storm, wasn't really aware of one thing. The job happened in the summer. My father passed away in the September. There's a whole things that sort of triggered around that time. And I think the first thing that I would take out from that is the importance of the resilience and the momentum. These situations are happening, and how you can actually manage them and in the moment. And just, my dad always used to say, You just got to keep going, boy. You just got to keep going. And it might sound a little trite, but I would be like, yeah, I've got to keep going. And whilst it was a desperately sad time, looking back, it was actually, I say, sometimes everything has to completely fall apart and completely unravel to find out where you're truly meant to be. And let me build on that, because when my father passed away, at his Thanksgiving, we invited a lot of people from his former work colleagues and organizations and things that he used to work for. And one of the lovely sort of condolences and messages that we had was someone said, "Oh, your father always came to work with joy. He was always," and again, it wasn't like a flippant thing and it's like everything's happy and the rest of it, because he was a deep thinker and things troubled him at times. But this person, this complete stranger, was like, "Oh yeah, your dad always came to work with joy." And to this day, it was just one of the kindest people we've ever worked with. And that was the trigger for me, because at the time, having lost my job, I was thinking, what's next? What do I want to do? And I was searching around, and I knew that I was gravitating more towards working with people, as in being a coach or consultant or whatever it was. But that was the tipping point. People should come to work with joy every day, and they should find joy in their life. And that was the catalyst for me to start Mercury Jam, to start my consultancy. And the values of the company are kindness, gratitude, resilience, and momentum. And I think if you have those ingredients, you call on them at different points of time, going back to, it's not all happy clappy. My energy level isn't always high. Sometimes it's pretty low. I'm human like anybody else. And I think that was the takeout from that experience. And it all made sense. And you need to keep moving. You say about start small, start simple, just start. Because if you're standing still, it's really hard to kind of make a change. It's really hard to make a difference. And it's just these little, small, incremental things that you can do to make a difference. And then you find the thing that you want to be doing, or that gives you joy, I would say.
What if you can't? I agree with everything you just said. I think that one has to keep going, but I think that in times of suffering, it can get tricky. So I'm just wanting to slow this down, this bit, because when we look back at our stories that we have about our own journey, it's very easy to see the linear, your father died, and it was this wonderful example, and I had this aha, eureka moment. But if you zoom in just a bit further.
Sure. Okay. I'm quite happy to go a little deeper and to share that from my own experience in the mid-90s, that I had a burnout, a work-related burnout. And I also have to say that I think burnout's the acceptable word for depression, because that's what it is. It's like, it's much easier to say, oh, he's on burnout leave, or they've gone on burnout leave, versus saying they're depressed. And to break it down a little bit, is one of the things that triggers, let's call it depression, is a chemical imbalance in your body. It's a lack of serotonin, and it's at the back of your neck here. Something physically, chemically is happening in your body. So saying to somebody, oh, you just got to keep going, when they can't even get out of bed, which was the case that I had on occasions. I'd come home from work on Friday, I'd go to bed, and I wouldn't get up till Sunday. Oh, keep going, do that. And you're like, really? Oh, no thanks. And I think in that moment, you need, there are those times when you just have to, if keeping going is just, I don't want to be too overly dramatic, just keeping alive, right? Just doing it and knowing that you can. Sadly, some people don't get through it. I have to acknowledge that. But to just be ticking over and understanding that it's a really dark place, but you can, the lightness will come back. And just, I think it comes down to self-belief. And some people don't believe that, which is very sad. But I think you just knowing, just keeping that drumbeat. Sometimes it's a boom, sometimes it's just, it can just be literally like just a pulse. Just keep that going. And I think that just, yeah, that's all you can do in those moments. So I acknowledge the question, and I think there was a really interesting post and thread that I saw the other day that I didn't step into, that I thought about, where this person was saying we should stop saying everything for a reason. Sometimes you don't want to hear that. And sometimes things are really shitty. And my response was, I think there's a context for both. And it's coming back to what we were saying. If at that moment, let's be personal and specific, when my father had died, and someone had said, hey, everything for a reason. Really? Wow. No, it's shit. It's really shitty. And it was 4 years ago and it's still shitty. But we need to, life has to have some kind of balance to it. And it can't always be so upbeat and so positive. You need those, the human condition needs those moments of pain, adversity. They are emotions that we have. Shouldn't deny them. We should learn from them. I think there's a tendency that we learn more from those painful experiences than like the happy ones, because we're just, hey, endorphins are kicking in and whatever. But I think there are lessons to be learned from painful experiences and adversity.
Yeah. No, thank you for your honest answer. I'm conscious to, as this is a conversation I'm sharing in a public forum, want to make sure that it shows all the ranges of states of being. It could be easy to listen to you and just launched a book, life's good, but it's not always easy.
No.
And it's so important to embrace all of the emotions that you experience. They all have a purpose.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing I would add there is, to your point about the pulse, and sometimes it can be just a pulse, is the importance of friendship, your own community, and how that can also be a lifeline.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would acknowledge that in the setup in your question. You mentioned that you didn't have the network, you didn't have the support. So in that context, I was like, if you don't have those friends, if you don't have that network, then you literally just have to focus on yourself. And that's why it all comes back to you. Sure, we can rely on others, but if all else fails, the constant that you have in this life is you. And I do think that it is important to, as you say, express the full range of emotions. There's a very short piece, I don't know if you've seen Choices in the book, I think I know it off the top of my head, where in the face of death, divorce, and geographical distance from my children, I choose peace, love, and kindness. Because it's something that there are desperately sad moments that I have, and pain that I have as a result of, particularly with the distance. My children, for context, my children live in America. They live in America with their mother. That's hard. And I'm not happy, clappy, and unicorn shitting rainbows all the time, because some days it's really awful. It's hard. But it is a day, and all the cliches come out. But you need the darkness to see the light, and you just keep going.
I have a question here in my little digital notebook that I come back to now and again that I'd like to pose to you now. And it's the following. How do you retake your passion? Have you ever lost your passion, and what did you do to get it back?
How do you retake your passion? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I think, to use your example of being...
I've got my thinking face on.
Yeah, no, I'm conscious of it. Trying not to get triggered by your thinking face. You talked about it in the 90s, having a period of quote-unquote burnout, depression. In some ways, that is the polar opposite of having passion, having a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I'm just wondering if there's any more edges to this discussion that we're having if I bring in the word passion, this idea of getting it back, refinding your light, refinding your purpose? How did you do it? What did you do to get it back?
For context, I was off work for almost a year. So the way that I look at it is that I almost lost a year of my life. And as a point, I didn't want to ever go back to that place, and which is where the notion of self-care came in. I think before people use the expression self-care. The language around burnout is incredible. Oh, self-care, mental health, super important. And maybe it's good to have these shorthands, descriptors, so people understand, but there's a lot going on underneath the surface. To come back to your question, sorry, sidebar. To come back to your question though, I think that those words, yeah, as branding folks, we use passion and purpose a lot. I think it's, to me, those are really heavy, worthy words. And I would say, what brings you joy? What brings you joy on a daily basis? And again, it's like small, more little moments that add up to something bigger. What are the things that resonate with you? So things that bring me joy are natural, quite often natural things that I see. And I have a series like A Little Bit of Joy. This week it was number 30, the spider's web. So you see a spider's web, stop and look at that. It's amazing, right? There's one outside, it's actually there's a picture that I posted. It's actually the spider's web outside there.
Is it on a blue frame there?
It's outside the door.
I think I can see another spider's web.
There's loads, and I don't clean away because the spiders are the natural noise. But you look at, that's one of nature's amazing architects doing their thing, possibly on a daily basis, and you just stop and pause. That brings me joy. And I think there's too much pressure on people. The thing that they do between the hours of light and darkness, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, which doesn't, traditional working frame doesn't exist anymore. People put too much emphasis on that work equals purpose, equals joy, equals their mission, their thing that they have to do. It's not. Your life comes first. And I think just embracing those moments. What are some of the things that I've posted about in the past? Like when I'm in the supermarket and you see a pile of fruit, like a pile of lemons. Where do those lemons come from? Look how they're like the inconsistency of them. The color, the tone, the hue. Take a moment, that brings you joy. So I think coming back to your question is just, how did I get through it? Is just finding those little small things that resonate and brought me joy on a daily basis. The first sip of a really good cup of coffee, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think as I'm hearing what you're saying, because we're sharing words here, my word is connection. And joy is slightly further down the road. But connection, to use your example, to the object or the physicality of the environment, the color. But for me, it started with connection to my body, to the somatic experience, to acknowledge anxiety, what's causing the anxiety, what's under the anxiety, and in some instances being able to branch off into how is that changing my mindset. So connection for me, I think, is one of the fundamental first steps in retaking passion. At least it has been for myself.
Yeah. When did you lose your passion then? Or have you lost your passion recently, to rephrase it?
I would say that the last 8 years have presented numerous moments of challenge. To talk about your 4 pillars: death of my grandparents, divorce of my own parents, the thing that everyone else has experienced, which is a global pandemic, some other things that are more recent that I would rather keep to myself at this moment in time. But every moment is a moment where I felt like I had a few inches taken off me. And it's accumulative. And every time it takes a little bit more from you and hollows you out. And I'm conscious not to go, woe is me. There's so much going on in the world right now. But everyone's suffering is relative. And so I would say of late, there's been numerous reasons for me to lose focus of my passion. And connecting to myself and my body and my essence has been the first step in finding that. And one literal example of how it is starting to manifest and evolve is having this conversation with you. Having the courage to do that. Because I love having these kind of conversations.
Thank you for sharing those examples. And I think that if you hadn't mentioned it, I was going to say, is that why you do the podcast? But I think it's a difference though, because you're having a conversation, and you and I, in our mission to find the perfect cinnamon bun, cinnamon roll, we walk and talk, right? But we're not recording those conversations. What are you hoping to gain or share with these conversations that you're having with people? What's in it for you and what's in it for the viewer, the listener? I'm
doing this for myself first. I've had a few people who say, hey, well, who's your target audience for this? Me. If I find this interesting, maybe by de facto someone else might find this useful. I want to create a quiet place for reflection that's safe and gentle and sensitive and open-minded. I think that there are not many places in the world, digitally or in the real world, that exist. It's a kind of space that I try to foster with my friendships and my relationships in my personal life and in work to a certain degree. But this is just another way to try and do that.
Yeah.
And I hope build up a body of knowledge that serves.
Yeah. I think the motivation for it, I love that. Again, we all branding and strategists. Who's your target? I think just if you're not doing something that you see a value in, one sees value in, wonder why the motivation for it. And people do things for revenue or whatever. But I love the goal of creating that, the sensitivity, the quietness or whatever. I might have shared this with you before, there's a good friend of mine who I used to work with here in Amsterdam, and they now live between here and Ireland, and they have a farm in Ireland. And it's called the Quiet Farm. Have I told you this? No? And I said, oh, the Quiet Farm. Why is it called the Quiet Farm? Because it produces silence. That's what we make here, silence. And I was like, oh, he's a creative, and all the rest of it. If you're listening, you know who you are. But I just, that has resonated with me. Just that you need these spaces. I think there's a need for people to talk about in a calm, considered way. And people want to talk about situations which maybe haven't been so good, and there's a learning from it. I think it's really important. And I think that's one of the, if I may, that's one of the reasons why the book is called A Bad Hand Played Well, because life isn't great all the time. And particularly working life for a lot of people isn't great, but you got to do it. You got to find your way through that situation. And it's on you, it's incumbent on you. It all starts with you, how you show up, how much control you put, how much energy you put in. And I think that's it's a necessary conversation. What you're doing, I think, is great. And because I think there's people do want to have those, people want to talk, they want to have these conversations, and hopefully they want to listen as well. Yeah.
That's so nice to hear. I'm sitting here going, I could keep talking with this man, but I think this also feels like a really lovely moment to pause and just be grateful for the conversation we've had. We may even have another one of these at some point if you were to be up for it. Absolutely loved this conversation. I'm so grateful for everything that you shared. I was going to ask you to introduce your book at the end here, but that felt like a very natural moment for you to talk about it. Neil, let's call it a day today.
Ben, firstly, thank you for the invitation. It's been lovely to have a seated meander. It's not often that we do that because our thing is to walk and talk. But I really appreciate the opportunity and your questions, and you've shared some great things, and I've really enjoyed the chat. And I think we should maybe put the coffee on again. Round 2.
Thanks, Neil.